Okay, so we've talked about the formation of the zygote, which occurs when, once again, the sperm cell um, fertilizes the egg cell, and we typically talk about three main periods of prenatal development: the germinal period. This is the first 2 weeks after conception, and again, this is when the zygote is first formed. There's rapid cell division, and we start to see the beginning of cell differentiation. Cell differentiation meaning that at first we only start out with one cell, it divides and produces two cells inside the organism that are the same. But eventually you start to see cells that are somewhat different from one another. So, for example, we've got heart cells, lung cells, kidney cells, hair cells, etc. We've got lots of different types of cells. Those different types of cells were not always present. That in the first day, most cells were all the same, and they didn't start to differentiate until later on in this germinal period. The second period of prenatal development, so we're talking about prenatal development here, this is prior to birth. The second period is called the embryonic period. This is from the 3rd through the 8th week, and here the basic forms of all body structures develop. The embryonic period begins when the zygote embeds itself in the uterine wall of the female. After the 9th week, we call it the fetal period. Okay, the fetus grows in size and matures in functioning. So you can see that from the ninth week until birth, 9.5, almost 10 months. This makes up the majority of prenatal development here. It's this fetal period. So as I said, the germinal period begins when the zygote begins duplicating and dividing within hours of conception. You get the development of the placenta during this time period. This is going to be the organ that surrounds the developing embryo and is attached to the wall of the uterus. It sustains life via the umbilical cord, which nourishes the organism and carries away waste products. Then you get implantation. About 10 days after conception, the developing organism burrows itself into the placenta that lines the uterus. The organism develops rapidly. Pregnancy can be detected due to new chemicals in the mother's urine that are being produced by the organism, by the fetus, by the zygote. Which is now transitioning into an embryo. So again, the ovary gets released, the egg cell, the ova, gets released from the ovary. It travels down the fallopian tube where, if it gets fertilized by a sperm cell, you can see some sperm cells here, it then implants itself in the uterine wall here. This is where it's going to continue to develop, and it's at this implantation stage here where we transition into the embryonic period. So the embryo, this is the developing organism from about the 3rd through the 8th week after conception. It begins when you see a primitive streak that appears down the middle of the cell mass. This primitive streak becomes the neural tube. This neural tube will then later form the brain and the spinal cord of the central nervous system. Also, during the embryo period, the head takes shape, so you can start to finally see a head region start to emerge. You start to see eyes, ears, nose, and mouth form. The heart begins to pulsate, and extremities develop, and webbed fingers and toes begin to separate. So again, here's some of the earliest part of the embryo. So it's kind of hard to tell. You can tell where the head is going to be, but it's a little hard to tell here. Here you can see a tail that's left on the embryo. Here you can really start to see the head region starting to develop and the development of the eye, and here you can see it even better with some blood vessels as well. Okay, the fetal period. This is, again, from 9 weeks after conception. until birth. During the fetal period, the genitals form and sex hormones cause differences in fetal brain organization. And two generalizations we can make about how the fetus develops are referred to as cephalocaudal and proximodistal growth. Cephalocaudal refers to head to toe development, so the head develops first, then the toe, or really it's head to tail. Cephalo refers to head, caudal means tail. And also proximodistal. Proximo meaning close, close to the body, so from the inside of the body out. Distal meaning distant from the body's midline. So that means that your arms form before your hands form before your fingers, etc. The heartbeat becomes detectable via stethoscope. All body parts and systems are complete during prenatal development. The cortex, however, is not fully mature at birth. Okay, the cortex, we'll see in a minute, is the outermost portion of the brain, and in particular, the prefrontal lobes, interestingly enough, won't develop fully until about 20 years after birth, believe it or not. The brain at birth is far bigger than any other part of the body. Okay, and this is actually quite interesting because this is not the case in most other species. Humans are quite unique in that their brain is far bigger than the rest of their body at birth. In the fetal period, the age of viability, this is the age at which a preterm newborn may survive outside the mother's uterus if medical care is available. This is about 22 weeks after conception. Before about 22 weeks, the chances of survival are very low. After 22 weeks, the chances of survival increase. Again, only with the help of medical assistance. The brain is able to regulate its basic body functions. That's actually the thing that's probably most essential for why it's this 22-week period that the chances of survival begin to increase at. The chance of survival will increase each day after the 22-week mark. So again, here we're looking at the brain development in a fetus. You can see the forebrain here, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. The forebrain is what's going to turn into the cerebral cortex, as you can see here, much larger. The midbrain and the hindbrain, these really develop first because they're controlling the functions of our body that allow us to survive, like breathing and controlling our heart rate and things like that. So at birth, the fetal brain signals, or what results in birth is that the fetal brain signals the release of hormones to trigger the female's uterine muscles. Labor begins. The average duration for firstborn babies is about 12 hours, but there's quicker labor for later-born babies. One way to assess the health of the newborn infant is using a scale called the Apgar scale. This is a quick assessment of a newborn's heart rate, breathing, muscle tone, color, and reflexes. It's completed twice, once at 1 minute post-birth and once at 5 minutes after birth. And a score of 0, 1, or 2 can be assigned in each category, and a desirable score is 7 or above. You're going to very rarely see 10s, but anything 7 or greater is considered to be a good score. So this is what we're looking at on this Apgar scale. The doctor or nurse or whoever is in charge of assigning these values will score the infant based on their color. So if they're blue or pale, they get a score of 0 for that. If their body is pink but their extremities are blue, they get a score of 1. And if they're entirely pink, they get a score of 2. So this is really indicative of the level of oxygen in the infant. Heartbeat, if it's absent, that's a score of 0. Slow, meaning below 100 beats per minute, is a score of 1. and rapid over 100 beats per minute is a score of 2. So you can see that, again, with reflex irritability, muscle tone, and respiratory effort, you can see what a score of 2, 1, and 0 would be for each of those. Sometimes surgical birth is necessary. This permits the fetus to be removed quickly. The rates and reasons for C-sections vary greatly. In the poorer countries, you see far lower rates. That probably has a lot to do with the fact that they can't afford to have them as often. It's reserved for emergency situations. You tend to see higher rates in richer countries, and oftentimes they're planned for the convenience of the mother and or the obstetrician. And this accounts for 1 out of 3 births in the United States is the cesarean section or C-section. It results in less trauma for the newborn, but it also results in a slower recovery for the mother. Subsequent cesarean deliveries may be necessary. So in a lot of cases, if a mother gives birth through cesarean section to her first child, she'll need to have the infant delivered via C-section for subsequent children as well. Thanks to medical intervention, infant mortality has decreased pretty significantly since the early 1900s. So in the year 1900, infant mortality was about 5%. That means that 5 out of every 100 births resulted in the infant dying. Today, it's less than 1 in 200. So that's, less than about less than 2% really. So childbirth has become safer for mothers. In addition to there being a high infant mortality rate, it could also be dangerous for the mother in the early 1900s. But the death rate is much lower in the United States. The death rate in the poorest nations can still be kind of high, 1 in 20 women in some of the poorest countries. Excessive medical care also has some disadvantages, though. It leads to an increase in unnecessary C-sections, which is associated with a higher rate of low birth weight babies. And we'll talk about low birth weight babies in just a minute. Okay, so what constitutes a low birth weight? A low birth weight has been defined as less than 2,500 grams, or less than about 5.5 pounds at birth. In the United States, there's been a steady increase in low birth weight over the past 25 years. Now, this is somewhat of a surprising finding, given that there's been quite a significant increase in our knowledge of prenatal development. So you might expect that low birth weight would be on decline. As many as 8% of newborns are seriously underweight. Now, one of the biggest problems associated with low birth weight is that they're more susceptible to teratogens, which I'll talk about in a minute. They have higher birth risks, and of course a lower survival rate. Teratogens are environmental toxins that can interfere with normal development. Now, in addition to low birth weight, since the weight of the infant is related to their survival weight, they further define low birth weight as being very low. Very low birth weight is under 1,500 grams, or about 3 pounds 5 ounces, and extremely low birth weight is under 1,000 grams, or less than 2 pounds 3 ounces at birth. So this is low birth weight. We also have terms to describe when birth occurs earlier than what we expect. So this is referred to as preterm. Preterm is defined as a birth that occurs at 35 weeks after conception. This is usually associated with low birth weight because at only 35 weeks, if the mother gives birth, the fetus hasn't had the full amount of time